what it does in the, well, you don't actually. Let's say you add a clip and then you delete a clip in the browse menu here in the media pool. What it does, it becomes a black with an X. So technically, it's not in the master session anymore, but the master session doesn't delete from the master session, so it keeps that metadata there, should you decide to add it later. But if you ever decide to kind of play out the master session and you've done some of that, you're going to run into some black holes. So
if you use the same shot twice and you want a different grade on each
yes,
time,
we'll get to that. There's functionality to break this linking. So for instance, you're doing a promo, right? Well, the promo, I don't care. We've got we've got the film graded like Transformers, but the promo, for whatever reason, it's got to match the network look of cold blue, right? So we can de-link that timeline from this functionality, and it will exist on its own, and none of the other sessions can reference back to it. It lives on its own existence. And if some point you want to flip it back, it's one button and it just goes back and now references back to the master timeline. The master timeline, however, it's just that. It's that one grade. And I'll actually show that to you happening in action. The other thing that you can do here in the conform window is you can load up let's say the client gives you their reference film. They give you the film baked into one clip, just so that you can go back to it, make sure everything matches, right? As a finisher also, that's important to me. I want to be sure that whatever I hand them is exactly what they gave me. There's no quicker way for a client to lose trust in you than for them to say that's the wrong shot, right? For some reason, we graded the wrong shot. The moment that happens, they will trust nothing else you do. It will take you days to gain that trust back. So I always ask for that offline clip. I always run it in Final Cut. I'll run it against it to make sure that everything matches, everything relinks, there's no problems. And then again, it's often useful, did we fly? I thought, wasn't he looking the other way? Wasn't he looking screen right? And you can go back to your offline in Resolve and say, no, you guys did a flop. This is how it actually is. You want me to do it here or do you know? But at least you have the offline here and you can keep it in sync as you're grading, and you can use that as like a still store. You can pull up on a still store, you can pull up and match, or you can pull up the offline at any given time to look at it frame accurately. What did the offline look while you're color grading in the color room without having to go anywhere else? I'll show you that. What else in here do I want to talk about? Yeah, EDL. So you can see that the master session, this is just a string out. You get an EDL if it had, when we're working in a timeline, multiple layers. As you click on the layers, the EDL, there's an EDL for each layer. And there are a couple other things in here we'll get to in a moment. All right, this is the color room. This is where we all make our money, or we hope to. And this is where all the action happens. All right. And this is the node that I just graded. This little guy here. This is the node. This is kind of our workspace. All right. And if I want to add nodes, let's see. Let's go to. All right. I'm adding nodes. Now, what's interesting here is each node. There's a ton of stuff, and I'll show you the rest of this in a minute with windows and all of that. Each node can only do one color correction. In other words, one grade. I can't have an inside window that goes red with an outside window that goes blue all in one node. I have to break that up. All right? But within each node, I have the full functionality of Resolve. So now let's call up our waveforms. So now let's say I wanted to bring this back to neutral. It's a little twitchy on me. All right, so I'm just grading off the scopes here, dropping this down, bringing this up. And let me take a look at my image. right, so you can see that what I've done here is in node number 1, I pushed it real blue. In node number 2, I've now pulled it back. And you'll see that the nodes kind of update, telling you what you're doing in each node. Really easy to see on extreme corrections like this. Subtle corrections, not so much. In fact, I think the DaVinci guys realized that because in version 8.1, if you hover over a node, it'll pull up a little contextual window telling you what parameters were adjusted on that node. Because not all parameters are instantly recognizable the way I've just done it right here. But you'll see that it's rolling down the tree from left to right. All right. Now, every single shot, when you first work on it, has a node already applied. It's just got nothing going on in it. And every shot must have, this is like this little bar right here. This is kind of like coming from the disk drive. So saying it's coming off the disk drive. You can think of it as the browse window, right? Coming off your media pool. This is my input node here, my little input module. This is my output where it's feeding to. And then this is to render. And you need to complete the circuit. If you don't complete the circuit, whatever you think you might be seeing isn't actually going to render out. All right? And depending on, let's see if it'll show me anything here. No, it won't. Some days it does, some days it doesn't. And then I can just take it, drag it. I've made the connection, and now it's doing its thing. So what are the corrections we've got? Of course, I've got the control surface here, but let's take a look at the interface. So what we've got on the interface here, you can think of this as your primaries. Now, when I do my training, there's a lot more primaries. You know, to me, a primary is anything that affects the entire image. Right? A secondary is anything where I start to isolate. You know, these curves here can act as primaries just by taking this curve and doing that. It's a primary, right? I mean, it's no different than you know, taking my master gain and dropping it down. In fact, it's exactly like that. But if I start writing a curve like this, I'm starting to get into secondary land. Because technically, I'm isolating parts of the image and manipulating those parts of the image, not others. That's how I think of the difference between primaries and secondaries. Because in Resolve, it's kind of fungible. It kind of goes any way you want, you know? So the notion of what's a primary, what's a secondary, you know, it's a little, you know, it's up for discussion in Resolve. And just by adding, you know, I can come in here and I've got windows. And let's do this. Let's do a quick little grade. So let me go through this right here. Lift, gamma, gain, red, green, blue, and then overall luminance. And now's a good time to talk about why RGB processing. All right, when you talk to the DaVinci guys, they're very proud that this is a YRGB color grader. All right, when you're working in color, you're RGB. All right, it's RGB. When you're working in Final Cut, it's YUV or YCRCB, if you want to be really anal about it. But I just say YUV because that's what it says in the Final Cut interface. Right? So it's YUV. What does that mean? Well, Y is your luminance channel, your brightness. Right? The U and the V are your color difference channels. In broadcast television, back in the day, all you had in black and white television was Y. Then they did something silly and they created color. And they were going to go RGB, and the FCC said, no, because then none of those black and white sets will work anymore. And we're going to have a lot of really unhappy constituents. You know about people and their TVs, right? So they said, here's what you're going to do. You need to make all these color signals backwards compatible with black and white. So what they did is they said, all right, we can use the Y channel, the brightness channel, and we can derive, and then we will encode two other colors on top of it, and the third color is going to be a mathematical equation that we derive from the Y channel, YUV. So you've got two colors and a luminance channel to get you to RGB. What that means is when you're grading in Final Cut on the three-way color corrector, brightness has a ton of impact on your colors. But you can take your colors and swing them all over the place, and it's not really going to move your brightness channel around that much, because brightness kind of exists independently of it. Whereas you'll notice, if you watch the parade scopes here, as I start pushing these around, and let me also pull up my waveform monitor. You'll notice that as I start affecting and working just with the RGB balls, you'll see that my luminance is jumping around. All right, so that's the RGB process, where RGB, it's all mixing together. And your brightness and your trackball corrections will all affect what's happening in here. Whereas, now let's also pull up the vector scope. And you'll notice as I start doing this, not only my colors going all over the place, but also watch as I affect brightness. Hello. Let's go to base mem reset. Let's just start from normal. All right, so I just basically reset that node so I know where I'm at. And all of a sudden, it's just really slow on me, that's all. So you'll notice if you watch my vector scope, you see how it's expanding and contracting as I'm making changes here, right? So that's RGB processing at work. Now, if I go back to base mem reset, I've got a second set of controls for brightness, the Y RGB. Now I've got it here on the control surface. I've also got it here, these are these white columns here, these fourth columns here. These are your Y controls. So now I'm going to do just my luminance lift. And you see how the vector scope is sitting there, solid? It's not changing. It's keeping the colors until I basically bring it to black, right? But you see as I'm making these changes, now I'm doing the gamma, now I'm doing the gain. My vector scope isn't being affected. If I come back, I go to base mem reset, I can do the same thing on here. All right, and you watch the vector scope. And until I bring it to black, the vector scope is solid. Reset. All right. But now, if I use these controls here, watch the vector scope. It's moving around. So, what does that mean? Well, what it means, one second. What it means is, if I'm working and I know I want to drop down my blacks on an interview shot, or I'm bringing down my gammas, I'm looking at the image and saying, but I really like the color, well then I'll go up to these top luma, gain, gamma, lift controls up here, the Y-only controls, because I'm going to tend to keep my saturation there. Whereas if I think, you know, it's also kind of oversaturated, then I'll go down to my contrast rings, because I know that as I affect it, I'll either increase saturation, decrease saturation, depending on which direction I'm moving. All right, so as you start playing with this, and you start seeing the effects on your images, and you're looking at a big old external monitor here, you'll start seeing the power of being able to kind of selectively decide if you're going to make luminance changes that are Y-only or RGB, because of the effect that they have on your vector scope and on your color channels. Yeah, your question?
Yeah, can you change the tools from linear to logarithmic?
Well, no. What you can do is, you know, in the node itself here, I could right-click. Okay, quick side note, right-click everywhere. When you're on Resolve and you're getting to learn it, literally, right-click everywhere. Contextual menus pop up all over the frickin' place. I mean, I've got contextual menus when I click on here, when I click down here, when I click over here. You know, it just, everywhere I go, I've got, you know, it's like a nightmare almost. But the truth is, you know, if you really want to get proficient at Resolve, I mean, if there's an interface element, you've got to right-click on it. I mean, you just, up here, I can show audio info. So if I tie an audio track to this, I can play it down in sync, and it'll show me the waveforms. So if I actually need to make a grade happen on a hit, I can actually do that by looking at the audio waveforms. All right, so right-click everywhere. The question about the logarithmic thing, if you wanted to work in log space, you would probably do that. Pull out my glasses. You would probably do that, here, where is it? Gonna move this out of the way. Hello. I don't know where. Come on. Oh, wait, it's in the node, sorry. You do it in the node here. LUT. And then you could pull in, let's say, an input LUT, something that would invert the S-curve that you're doing. You'd pull up a LUT that would, an invert. Oh, there's some invert LUTs here. Invert color or whatever. You pull up some sort of invert LUT that would flatten out the image for you.
But the tools will stay linear.
Yeah. I mean, the tools, it's kind of, yeah, I mean, there's no, are you saying like when you're working slowly, it makes small moves, and then when you move it faster, it gets faster?
It's just because maybe I'm used to Lustre, and you can change the architecture to linear from that.
Yeah, no, there's nothing like that. I mean, there is, for instance, on dynamics, you can change ease in and ease outs, kind of. You can change that in dynamics and keyframes. So there's actually you can actually write your curve how you want it to be. But are you talking like for the interface itself, like literally the control surface control? Yeah, no, I'm not aware of that there's any kind of, yeah, no. Yeah, so that was YRGB versus RGB. Any questions on this so far? You kind of get that and what that all means? Good deal.
Is there any way with the keyboard that you can do the lifting all of the gamma YRGB?
Yeah. So if you hold down, there's either, I forget exactly what it is, but I think if you hold down, oh, that's the shift key. Which is it? There is. It's a keyboard shortcut, and I just forget what it is. I don't use it very often. But there is a keyboard shortcut that will enable this functionality. Now, if we reset this, and we go into the three-way color corrector, and I think, let's see. There you go. So if you hold down the Option key, and you move the contrast ring while holding down the Option key in the mouse, you'll see that I'm not affecting, it's doing all three. And in fact, if I come over here, flip back to the primary, you'll see the move I just did. And let's make it bigger so you can actually see it. Let's make this a really big move. I just did a Y-only correction there. Whereas if I were to now come back to the three-way color corrector, let go, don't use the Option key, and drop this down, you'll see that now all three of these drop down together as an RGB correction. And it left the Y component where it was. All right, now the three-way color corrector is just another interface for this, because there is nothing more tedious than trying to color grade with a mouse using 9 different parameters. All right, I mean, just doing this move right here, if you go to the primary, you can see I've made 3 corrections, 3 separate corrections to make that red push. All right, annoying as heck on a mouse. So when they released Resolve Lite, the free version, they knew they had to accommodate mouse colorists. And so they added a whole 3-way interface here, which is exactly like this. Any of the moves you do here will be reflected here. In fact, any of the moves I do here, you're seeing it all update live. You get these little number readouts down here that tell you what are the corrections you're making to each of the channels. You've got hue, saturation, lumamix, reset, and of course the old famous auto color, which auto color pretty much is a contrast adjustment for the most part. At least that's what I found it to be. You know, it just looks for the darkest part of the image and makes it black, looks for the brightest part of the image, makes it white, and that's generally what it tends to do. And then finally, to finish up in this kind of primary section here, you've got the RGB mixer. Let's go to this shot. And so what have I got here? I've got a bunch of controls in here. This RGB mixer. This is new to version 8. I've got red, green, and blue. And under red, red is at 100. Under green, green is at 100. Under blue, blue is at 100. Now what I can do is, let's say I'm really happy with let's say I'm not happy with the red channel, and I'd like to have more of the blues, information from the blue channel make it into the red channel. Well, I could just come down here, hold on to the blue channel, and now I'm taking the information from the blue channel and using that to thicken up the red channel. Or I could do the reverse. I've actually used this once or twice. A client says, yeah, pull a little bit of blue out of the skin tones. This is one way of maybe trying to do that. I've played with it that way. This is obviously pretty good for look correction. One way that it can be used is for blown out highlights. So you bring the information and you bring down the highlights and they're blown out and they go pure white. Well, maybe the blue channel has detail in it. So I can basically do an HSL selection, just the luminance, just the top end of the luminance, and pull in some blue into the red and try to pull in some of that detail. That sometimes works. Then, of course, to monochrome. When you click that to monochrome button, it's exactly the same as just taking the saturation and just cranking it down. Just take saturation to 0. That's the same as clicking this checkbox, which I generally find to be pretty uninteresting and not a fun way of making black and white images. What I used to do in color was in the color effects room, I'd split my RGB channels out, and then I'd only recombine the 2 cleanest channels, and then start tweaking the image from there. So you can kind of do the same thing. To monochrome, I could take the blue channel, and you can see this kind of red's at 21 here, green's at 71, blue's at 7. So it's kind of representing the mix of how heavy each channel influences when you do the guns on the television. So if I wanted to pull in less blue and add more green, a little bit more red. All right, let me get rid of some of these other windows. We'll keep this guy here. I don't know about the rest of you, but RGB parades is pretty much how I make my money. It's pretty much how I evaluate all my images. Decide what I'm going to do. And so let's save this off. Right? If I come up here, well, let's do it first from the grab still under the view menu. All right, so now I've grabbed my image, my black and white image. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a version so that we can compare the difference between what I just did to just a straight desaturate. So I'm going to, all right, we're working the master session, create new version. And I'm not going to name it anything. So now it automatically names it version 2. All right, so I right click, I can load up version 1. And if I also load up version 2. Now you notice they're exactly identical because when you create a new version, it takes what you've already done and copies that across to the new version. It assumes you don't want to start from scratch. You might just be tweaking off the original. That's the base assumption of it. And if I want to start from scratch, then I do like a base mem reset and I start fresh. In this case, what I want to do is I just want to reset this to monochrome. And now, as I load up between the 2 versions, you can see here's my straight desaturate, and here's my alternate black and white. Kind of looks crappy, but it's different. And now we've just used the still store, because now what I can do is if I wanted to, I can create a new version, version 3. Let's do a base mem reset. So we're back to normal. Now, not only does this still store, in fact, I'm going to take it a step further. Let's do a quick grade on this, right? I have no idea how it looks up there, so if it looks great or terrible, it's not me. And let's kick up the saturation. Now I'm going to add another node. And so we're going to add a serial node here. And what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to add a vignette. So I go into the window here. I've got 4 different windows that I can affect. I'm going to come in here and they're circular, square, which is linear. Polygon starts as a square and then I just add control points and I can kind of do a quick mask with hard edges. And then curve, which is a user-defined mask. So for a vignette, what I'll typically do, turn it on. You can see on the node here, it shows me a circle wipe. I'll take that. And then I'll take the softness and make it pretty hard. And I want to do an outside vignette. So I've got some controls in here. And this one is inside outside. And you can see by looking at the node, as I switch between inside and outside, it's showing me what I'm affecting in the node. So there's going to be an outside. And I'm just going to take down a little bit of the midtones, a little bit of the shadows, a bit of the highlights. Right? And I tend to like to work with this hard when I'm doing this. And then I can kick up the softness, which I can do by the mouse. Or I can come up to here, Windows, and kick up the softness this way. All right, and of course I can zoom it and rotate it. And if I wanted to focus, let's say I wanted to do this on the road. So we wanted to focus for some reason on the road. And kick up the aspect. Make it a little smaller. All right, and then I can turn that off. You can see what's going on there. Now if I toggle this on and off, that's the vignette we just created. Go to Session, go to View, grab the still. All right. Now the cool thing when I just grab this still, you would think, so let's go back to version 2. I'm going to load up version 2. We're trying to decide if we really want to go black and white or not.
Can you pause for 10 seconds?